Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to What If Wrestling, where we explore the alternative realities of the squared circle. I'm your host, Glenn Thomas. With me, as always, is the wizard himself, nephew Corey. What's going on, wizard?
Yo, long time overdue. Let's get into this. I am excited.
Me too, my man. We got my main man, Champ Creed. What's going on, Champ?
Heidi ho.
Yo, definitely. Today we're diving into the scenario of what if Triple H has taken control of WWE earlier. We know that Triple H is now in control of WWE, and business is booming for the WWE. Sellouts each and every week on Raw and SmackDown. Gates are money just flying all over the place in WWE, which makes us think about what if Triple H has taken over the company a little bit earlier. So let's get into it, man. Let's get into it. Let's not give a time frame or a year, but we can talk about multiple years. We'll start with you. If Triple H had taken over the WWE from Vince McMahon a little bit earlier, how would business have changed?
So I'm gonna, it's kind of a fantasy booking scenario, but also we can use real time. We can use real time frames in this in the sense of justifying the explanation. I will say this. Had Triple H been able to take over, and the reason why this comes up as a what if, Glenn and Champ, is because of the real life. We're speaking in hindsight because of the real life stuff that started to happen in 2022 when Vince McMahon was, under the gun from different reports and whatnot coming out. I would say this. I think for the preface of to preface this conversation, I think if we can go to other time frames as well, but I think a good base would be that time frame around May, June, July of 2022, because then Vince comes back right around WrestleMania of the next year, and then is gone again in January of this year of 2024. So we have kind of a base foundation to go off of that we could say, hey, for the sake of argument right now, if Triple H takes over in 2022, wow. I'm going to start there. And I will say, I do think we get we already were starting to get an influx of the rehires. We saw Karrion Kross come back. We saw Hit Row come back. I think Mia Yim came back, I think, at some point, so we started to get people back. And I don't know if as many people would have left and maybe ventured over to AEW. A lot of people had already done that, but I think you maybe see a lot of people. I'll say this, actually, let me take that back. We saw a lot of people re-sign with AEW, if you all know. You saw Moxley re-sign with AEW. You saw, I think Adam Cole may have extended himself. So I think had Triple H been fully vested and in charge earlier, you might have seen people come back to WWE instead of ultimately just re-signing with AEW.
Yeah, I want to add on that. You talk about that list of people who came back in 22 that rehired. Some of the names that stood out to me was Braun Strowman stood out to me. So that came back. Johnny Gargano, who came back, right?
Well, he re-signed. He never left, really. His contract might have expired, but he never went anywhere. So that one I wouldn't.
Well, yeah,
he never went anywhere.
Yeah, he never went anywhere. He left. He was off of TV. Put it that way.
Yes.
He was off of TV. He was off of TV. Another one, regardless his soul, is Bray Wyatt came back too. That was one of the biggest ones that came back in 22. Bray came back in 22 as well.
Yes.
And that was one. He was released in July of that year of 21, but came back in 22. And so that was a big one who came back in 22 after Vince McMahon had left.
Yeah. No, that's right, Champ.
Well, if we're going to go timeline-wise, if we look at, when accusations started to rise in terms of the situation with Vince, and if you put Triple H in at the helm, even if you inject him into a leadership role earlier, you still have to deal with the fact that, let's say he takes over 2019 before the pandemic, right?
Sure.
Before the pandemic. Okay, you don't have as many defections, and you do have talent there that does stick around because of the relationship and the rapport that he has, right?
Right.
But didn't he have a heart failure situation in 2021? Was it?
Yeah. That's a
Okay.
great point.
So now here's the thing: if Vince is out of play because of the legal situation, and now Triple H is in charge, right? He has the health issue. He steps out. I think Stephanie steps in.
Yep.
And I think Stephanie now runs the show. And dare I say, I do not see her giving back the reins to anyone once he's running the show. And I think that if this would have happened, she would still be in charge today.
You know what? I'm going to piggyback on that, champ, because I want to add something to that. If Stephanie's in charge, Stephanie is highly, highly respected by that talent that's in the locker room. I think a lot of people stay, like you mentioned, that as much as they respect Triple H, they respect Stephanie just as much. And I think Stephanie is just as much of a constant and a security reason for people to stay as a Triple H is. And because Stephanie she's as much as the business as anybody. Well, really, I'm sorry, I'll take that back. Stephanie is more of the business than anybody. She's a McMahon. So she is the business. So I think a lot of people in that regard would stay or would come back to WWE because of her. So that's a great point. If she's in charge, yes.
And now, with that being the case over at AEW, I mean, to have a McMahon and to have Stephanie McMahon in charge running the WWE, I do think all of the business opportunities that, came up that Nick Khan helped put together, I think those things go as smoothly as they've gone now. I think that AEW still remains a solid number two. I don't think they get as much of an influx of frustrated talent from WWE over there, but I do think that if you have Stephanie in charge and you're Tony, you really can't fire any shots, And what that would probably do, because that would just, Stephanie in charge running the show would steal all the headlines. I think that will force AEW to be a little bit more creative. I tend to believe that Cody still leaves.
Absolutely.
I think Adam Cole stays. I think Adam Cole stays over at WWE, NXT, wherever you want to put him. I do believe that Punk still goes to AEW. And I really can't, just from the imagination capacity of it all, I really don't see too many things changing except for Vince looking to get back into the position of power, but he doesn't get it. He doesn't get it. And I think Triple H comes back and then he's in his position that he's in now, whereas, well, not, I guess you would say a step down in charge of creative. And then you're just dealing with Paul Levesque, Stephanie McMahon, and Nick Khan in control running the show, which is kind of like almost how it is right now.
Yeah, no. It's funny you bring up the Punk thing because I was going to bring that up. I do think Punk also is the one that still goes to AEW regardless. Like,
yeah.
I think that's I do think that's Punk's only avenue back into wrestling is through AEW. I don't think Punk ever truly comes back to I think it took, and it's almost veering off to another subject, but it's still on. I don't think Punk goes back to WWE until he sees what happened in AEW. And like I said, we're speaking in hindsight because we've seen what has happened. But if I'm Punk in 2021 like he was, and I have a decision to make of whether to go back to WWE or to AEW, because I want to say he may have had some small preliminary talks with WWE about possibly going back.
He did.
Yeah.
He said
So
he did.
if I'm him, I still go to AEW.
Oh.
I just feel that was the better move for him.
Wait. I do you one better. If we can do the timetable thing, remember when Punk was in Chicago and he went backstage to see Bailey and see a couple of people?
Yeah, that was 2022.
Was he under contract with
AEW?
AEW?
No. That was 23, I think.
Yeah, that was in 23.
That was in 23. So he was under contract.
Okay, all right. Because the thing is now, they said that Vince made the call to have him removed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what happens if Stephanie's in charge and she doesn't make that call, and you have CM Punk backstage, a signed AEW wrestler backstage at a WWE event?
It wouldn't have been the first time though. I think you had Sasha back there before too, or somebody else that was in AEW. I think Daniel Bryan came back one time too, and I think he was already signed with AEW. I think it wouldn't have been a good thing. It wouldn't have been a bad thing. Vince got him removed because of the animosity. So you got to realize Triple H, with Triple H being in charge, we'll go back to Triple H. Triple H knows how to negotiate agreements or how to bring people together. Look what he did with Bruno Sammartino and Vince, right?
Mm-hmm.
Triple H sees the bigger picture. He kind of listens to what the fans want in that era. So if Triple H was in charge and Vince was nowhere in the picture, Punk wouldn't have been removed from backstage. He would have been able to be backstage and be able to do everything that he needed to do, and wouldn't have been any animosity. Remember, the really beef was between Punk and Triple H, right?
Yeah.
So if Triple H can bury the hatchet with the CM Punk, if he was in control, I think it's all about the bigger picture and about the money and how the company moves. And I think we've seen some things from Triple H as being in charge, even when 22, when I think he was a chief content creator, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we saw some storylines come in, because we got to look at one of the biggest storylines that happened. Why Vince was there, that Bloodline storyline, which is still currently running right now, right? Well, let's not even say Bloodline. Let's go to Roman Reigns winning the WWE Universal Championship, whatever you want to call it. That is still there while Triple H was in charge, right? So, and all the things that Nick Khan has played into it, that as you mentioned, Nick Khan and Stephanie, that cohesiveness that Nick Khan and Triple H has been building together, which people don't understand. It was Triple H who introduced Nick Khan to Vince McMahon anyway, right? So it was Triple H who was bridging that gap. It was setting things up for himself, that if Vince had not gotten in any trouble, I still think there would have been some rumbling or some beef in the house anyway, because let's be honest, Triple H had a vision that was not Vince McMahon's vision. I think we talked about it before we came on. That's why Vince was shutting down NXT in 2019, because NXT got more love, right, than the main roster. So everybody, the boys were loving, boys and girls were loving Triple H because of the content he was putting out, the storylines that people were writing, the things that was going on, and we starting to see that. We see that today. So if you imagine in 2022 how things would have been booming even more, it would have changed some WrestleMania matches. It would probably change some Survivor Series winners, in that era.
Yeah. So
if he had total control, and we may not have gotten that whole Brock Lesnar, Brock coming back and all that, because Brock was Vince's boy, not necessarily Triple H's.
So here's my thing. Something else that we're playing, because we're playing the what if game right here. We're only playing one side of it, and I mean that in the sense of, what if there's no reason that Punk's ever backstage in the first place, because things are going well in AEW? We got to take that into consideration, that if we're going to play the what if on one side, we're playing the what if / hindsight, because if Stephanie's in charge, and then Punk's backstage, we're playing, yes, the what if on that side, but you're incorporating the real life scenario of what really happened and why he was being suspended. So we do have to play the other side, that what if that just never happens, because there's never a situation that he needs to be back there in the first place. Now, here's a what if with that situation. What if Triple H is in charge right now? What if Punk's deal with AEW when he signed in 2021 is a 3-year deal and it's coming up now? Does Punk go back to WWE after his contract ends with AEW, assuming nothing goes wrong and he's had
but that's a big assumption right there, because listen, Glenn, I don't know if we were on record of saying this, but when they announced that Kenny Omega, the Bucks, and Cody were going to be part of the decision-making executive branch and also be wrestlers, we both said that that's a bad idea. Remember, Remember, G, when we said that?
Yeah, I definitely remember we said that.
Yeah, and I think it was inevitable. So I don't think that there's any scenario where things don't go bad in AEW.
Okay, I can respect that. I can respect that. But in that same token, and I love Punk, and listen, I'm a Punk fan. He's the only one that necessarily something has to this magnitude has gone wrong. So
no, something went wrong with Cody, and that's why Cody ain't there.
Oh yeah, well yes, and that's why ultimately Cody left. I don't know if, and we truly don't know the reason.
I know the reason.
That's another what if we got coming up.
That's another what if, but I will.
That's a Mike Knox what if.
I will
shout out to Mike.
Look, I will say this. I think that is I don't think Cody's was a creative situation in the sense of how he was being booked on television.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean by that. I don't think it's that, which is why I'm saying I don't think it's a situation like that. But to your point, though, yes, it does seem inevitable that something was going to go wrong, where it was eventually something was going to be where Punk is going to be wooed back to WWE. I do think, and like I said, this is all in hindsight, but I do think that there's a situation that the way Punk was, for the matches he was having, at least in AEW, I think the bug was going to eventually be back. He was going to go back to WWE. If Bret Hart and Ultimate Warrior could go back to WWE, I think the door was open for Punk to eventually get back.
Yeah, and that's all part of Triple H, though. I mean, I think everything has to deal with the Triple H being in power at that time, with Triple H having a much greater pull, if I would say, for that. Because I think Vince is when, Champ, you said if Vince kicked him out of the building, he wasn't going to broker that deal, right? This is where one of the things that Triple H was able to do that Vince couldn't do or didn't want to do. I think Triple H here was able to bring guys like Austin Theory up and around, right, with some of the creativity that he did with Austin Theory. Let's be honest, he was able to bring Nia Jax and Becky Lynch, right? Their storyline, which was really been a big thing since Triple H been in charge. The bloodline thing we talked about, the Sami Zayn thing with the bloodline was under Triple H's thing. That was huge, right? So you see how his creativity has woven itself into the world.
He doesn't micromanage. Like, that's the thing. Vince micromanages everything. Listen, the one thing about this what if that I'm pretty sure people might have been listening to this and like, wait a minute, you're glaring over a big thing. We would not have a LA Knight if it weren't for the situation that went down. Because LA Knight was on his way. He might have been going back. Not that it's a bad thing at this point, but he might have been on his way back to TNA. Because the gimmick that he had when Vince was running, it was not working. It was not working at all. So I do think that if Vince was stepped out of the picture earlier, Triple H came in, sticking with our scenario. He's unhealthy. He goes out. Stephanie comes in. I do think you still have guys like LA Knight emerge because we put the emphasis a lot on who went to AEW versus who stayed, whatever. But the guys that were there, they were developed through that creative freedom that Hunter gave, or that was under Hunter's regime, you know? So, I mean, you got a situation where we're just coming off of this is our first show since Mania. I don't think the dynamic of success changes. I just think that the cast of characters at the top just shifts roles, because the one thing that I can say about WWE, and this is just something within business in general, there are ebbs, there are flows, there are ups, there are downs. You know, in the realm of entertainment, we're at this cycle to where, you know, wrestling is hot again, and it's right on time. You know, where we are right now, I believe it was inevitable because you can only do certain things but for so long, and the winds of change, you know, they come in, and it was just amazing to me to hear every wrestler or everyone saying not only that they're just saying it's the new era, but like how they feel free, how they feel like it's a breath of fresh air and all that. And this situation was a long time coming. And it would have either been Triple H or Stephanie. The roles would have intertwined or interchanged, you know, but we still get what we get now.
But you know, you mentioned Stephanie, but one of the things that Brian up is the story of Vince and Kennedy McMahon was still, it came out, even if Triple H has taken over for 22.
Oh yeah,
it was coming.
Yeah, that was coming. It was a long time coming.
Yeah. So we still got to point out it was coming, but it made Stephanie walk away for a minute. So then you would still have Hunter by himself, or without Stephanie
until the heart.
Stephanie walked away from the position in the company. I think she's still, through Triple H, is doing things, because she's all of a sudden just has appeared again a couple of times.
Right.
Yeah, like, I'm not going to go to the extreme that she's on her way back, but I do think there are influences that are still fed through Triple H from Stephanie.
Oh, of course, she did.
And honestly, look, well, now that you've said it, she probably is there, and it just ain't listed or something. She probably there.
Hey, listen. I ain't want to speculate, but at 40, I did see a guy that kind of walked with his shoulders like this, and he had a hat on and some shades and a trench coat, and that was on night 2. It was warm on night 2. Night 1, no problem. Night 2, I don't know, maybe more than Stephanie backstage as well.
There's always an empty seat. There's always an empty seat at the board.
Always an empty seat at the board.
Yeah. So let's get this. We Champ, you brought up earlier, right? And I want to talk to some about some of the characters who have who have grown since WW, since Triple H has been in charge. And one of the characters that came to my mind, which I think Triple H had a lot to it, is Dominic Mysterio. Because look where Dominic was at prior to Triple H, that's where he's at now, right? It was a great story. Him and Ray won the tag team titles, right? But now you get Dominic breaking away from his dad to becoming one of the biggest heels in one of the biggest heels in the company for a stretch. This dude is like instant heat when he walks into the arena. And I think Triple H has a lot to do with Dominic Mysterio as well, because there's a lot of people who thought Dominic Mysterio should have went down to NXT and wrestled NXT. But because of the creativity and what Triple H saw in Dominic Mysterio, I think it allows us to get what we got, which was the Judgment Day, which was Dominic being hot. With Dominic, one of the best storylines there was turning on Rey Mysterio and moving and coming into his own. So I think that's one of the stars that has emerged since Triple H has been in charge. You guys, who do you think has really emerged since Triple H has taken charge?
Well, you mentioned them earlier. LA Knight is one for sure, because he doesn't get. Champ hit it right on the head. LA Knight is as good as fired if he doesn't change from Max Dupree back to LA Knight. He's as good as gone. Gunther is probably the one since Triple H even had any kind of remote power that is probably the number one rising person. Honestly, that off the top of my head, it's got to be Gunther. Gunther won the Intercontinental Championship in June of 22. And that's right around where stuff was coming out and Triple H was starting to really like kind of take over. Yeah, so I'm going to say Gunther is probably the one that if anybody has benefited the most from Triple H being in any kind of power, it's him.
I got one more, but I'm going to let Champ go ahead and go too.
Oh, no, LA Knight was my first one, man. I mean, like I just look at where he was versus where he is. Oh, boy. Night and day, man. Night and day. That was a bad gimmick. It was really, really bad.
It was terrible.
That belonged on WrestleCrap. If that site's still around, let me see if WrestleCrap's still around.
But again, those two dudes are not even in the company. The other person I think benefited the most from Triple H being in charge, and I got to go back to my man Champ because he stopped wearing the hat and he started doing his own thing, and that's Sami Zayn.
I told you. I
think Sami Zayn benefited the most, right? Gunther's up there, Dominic Mysterio's up there, but I really got to say, with Triple H in the new helm or in this position, Sami Zayn has benefited the most from me, in my opinion, from storylines to the matches with Roman to being the IC champion, even the storyline that he's currently with Gable. If this would have helped happen earlier, I think Sami Zayn will be much further along. I think is where it's supposed to be at. But I think Sami and what Triple H is doing and the creativity or the freedom that having some of these guys have has really made Sami Zayn. You saw more character from Sami Zayn in 22, right? You saw different things from Sami Zayn. You saw him open up a little bit more. And I'm not talking about the El Generico and all that, but you saw Sami being able to be free on the mic. And I think that doesn't happen with Vince McMahon. And not only him being free, I think a lot of wrestlers have become more free on the mic, right? Since Triple H has been in charge, where there's some realism and more realism that goes into the art of this professional wrestling thing, right? And I think if Triple H had taken over much more sooner in 22 and could had a continuous run with it, we would have seen a lot more stuff. I think a guy who suffers from the fact that Triple H will do that too. We'll go to that later, but I think Sami Zayn is one that excelled since Triple H has been there. So let's go here. Which wrestler has suffered because Triple H didn't take over earlier?
Well, that's tough because
I got one in mind. I mean,
I got one in mind too. Now I do. Yeah. Even though I
don't want to get sad, to be honest with you.
So this person for me, I feel as though they could have been even higher where they are, but they're doing well. But I feel like they're a Triple H person to where if they had another 2 years under them of really legitimate creative behind them, they'd be really far off. I'm going to say Ricochet. Ricochet, I think, is one where if he has true creative backing, like main event backing, I think he's somebody that would be a regular mainstay at the top of the card right now. I do.
Yeah, the person that for me is not even the company, right? I think if Triple H had taken over earlier,
I already know who you're going to say. I know who you're going to say. Go ahead.
I think Keith Lee could have had a better run.
That wasn't who I was thinking.
I think if Triple H had taken over earlier, Keith Lee would have had a better run in the company than he had because Vince was really sour on that. So go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what's funny? When you said Keith Lee, I thought about the food critic and not the wrestler.
Wow.
That's what I'm talking about, Keith. When you say Keith Lee, but no, let's be honest. When you say Keith Lee, it should be, I think if Triple H would have been in charge, Keith Lee would have been bigger than the food critic. Right? It would have been Look at the moment. Think about the moment he had with Brock at the Royal Rumble, right? Think about what he did at that Royal Rumble, and Keith Lee was kind of the man. It was showcasing him and giving him the opportunity and the ability to be the guy. And then Vince didn't like whatever. I guess it was his look, right? It was his way.
Did he make him shave? He made him shave his mustache or something like
He made
that.
him shave his face.
Yeah, shave his
It's
face.
like you didn't know what Keith Lee was going to look like every week.
Every week, it was something different. Name change. What was the name? Gold Dog Keith Lee. What was the name?
No, Bearcat.
Bearcat. I said Gold Dog.
Yeah, so Vince was messing with the dude's character. He was messing with the dude's character and could never got any consistency. Gold Dust.
It's a combination of Gold Dust and Junkyard Dog. They didn't know what to do with him.
They had no clue. Which goes to my point. If Triple H had taken over earlier, he would have known what to do with Keith Lee because he had Keith Lee rocking and rolling in 2019 in the earlier years in NXT. Keith Lee would have been on. So he knew what to do with him. Vince just didn't want to deal with him. You gotta get called. He called the kid dude Bearcat, right? You made him shave, all kind of stuff, and Keith Lee suffered from that. And then we know what happened to Keith Lee. He was out of the company.
Yeah. I mean, we truly don't know if it's because remember the weight thing was also thrown around, so which we truly don't know.
Yeah, Vince wanted the weight thing, but see, Keith didn't do what Gunther did, right? Because both, let's be honest, both of them had the weight issue, and both was kind of told to do the same thing, right? And I don't know who told
one did, if that's the case, one did it and one didn't. If that's the case of what it was.
If that's the case, what it was. So if Triple H would have gotten Keith Lee ear because they had a relationship, it might have been different for Keith Lee, and we might not have seen Keith Lee in the WWE and AEW. He still have been in WWE running Rec Shop or having some good quality matches, top mid carder in that level. Because I don't think anybody that we talk about was going to take anything away from Roman, right?
Yeah,
I don't care.
I thought that face off with Brock, that was the
I thought that was
the launch pad.
The launch. I was about to say the same thing, Keith. Yeah. I thought it was the same thing. I did. I thought that when they saw each other in the ring, Brock's putting them over even silently. He's like, whoa, like Brock's giving that nod to you. I'm like, oh, this is somebody you run with. Because they already.
What Rumble was that again?
That was 20. Right before the pandemic hit. That was 2020. So with that, also, you know what I thought you were going to say? I guess it seems more obvious to me. I thought you were going to say Sasha Banks.
It came to mind, but I thought, Keith was the biggest one. I think, Sasha, we can go down that rabbit hole because that's a good one, too. That's a real good one.
If that deserves its own show, actually.
Yeah,
but it does. But if Triple H was never in charge, if Triple H was totally in charge, Sasha and Naomi wouldn't have left. But I think it would have hurt Naomi not leaving. I think Naomi had to leave.
I'm going to respectfully disagree. I will say this.
No, not for the company. Naomi had to leave for her to know that she can flourish outside of WWE.
She needed a refresh. I think whatever she's doing, I will say that, not even in a bad way. I'm saying it just objectively. I think maybe whatever she was going to do with that Glow character up to when she had left was going to be done. And now that I agree with you. Because she's a different person back now. You know what I'm saying? She's a different character now. But I'll give you that she maybe needed to leave back then in hindsight for the sake of her own character. But I don't know if they ever leave if Triple H is fully in power because
they don't.
They left the same time everything started coming up with Vince, right? That all happened at the same time.
Around the same time, but it was because what I've heard, it was in you got different stories that it was kind of because of Vince and what he wanted them to do on that show that night.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, if that's the case, then
because and we can look it up, but I think that was one of the things, like what they wanted them to do. They went to Vince, he wasn't backing them. They're like, oh, okay, we can show you better, we can tell you. Boom. Like I said, but that deserves a whole little show if Naomi and Sasha hadn't left. But I think it wouldn't have went down with Triple H. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, that I agree with. I don't think they leave if Triple H is fully in power. I agree with that. But then again, one came back and one didn't. So
Well,
I think
the other one didn't come back.
that came down to money.
That came out of money. I'm about to say the other one ain't coming back because when somebody throw the Brinks truck at you, right, and you know you can get that money, but you can always come home. Like the door is always open.
It seems like it's already been alluded to. That's what it seems like.
Right. Like that door is not closing, right? She's gonna come home. But let me go make this money first because my man's giving it to me. It's free money.
Yeah.
It's free money. And I can name my price. I'm gonna go home. But it's loyalty to Triple H, right? And I don't know if the loyalty to Triple H is from these wrestlers that's outside of WWE is because he's been a wrestler, because they looked up to him. Because that's what you get in a lot of guys too, though. There are a lot of wrestlers now had looked up to Triple H because he was their favorite when they was growing up as a child, right? They saw the attitude there. They saw the things that he's done. He's the game. He's a cerebral assassin, right? So he has it. He gets it. He understands it from the fact of not only the CEO or COO, but also as the wrestler, right? As the person who's been on the road for 300 some days, who grinds, who understands it. And he gets storyline, he gets storytelling, he understands the business, he understands. And let's be honest, we're really honest, this is a different type of wrestler from what Triple H was when he was wrestling, right? It's not all the stuff that used to be in the locker room. So he relates to that. Vince couldn't relate to that, right?
No.
Triple H relates to these, to the younger crowd or to that new generation. So if you had Triple H starting off earlier, that's why NXT was so hot because he understood it, right? NXT, if Triple H would have stayed at NXT in 2019, could legitimately be in the top second brand next to WWE. That's why I say AEW might not even smelt the second brand if Triple H would have stayed in charge. If Vince hadn't sabotaged, like Corey was saying, in 2019, NXT would have been like that. That would have been him part two.
Well, think about it this way too. What Triple H is running now is essentially his graduated NXT.
Mm-hmm.
90, I wouldn't even say 90, probably 95% of the roster came through Triple H's NXT at some point right now. Right. So he is essentially what we're seeing now is him if he had been, and that's wow. It's just like lightning striking my brain. That is the connection of this show entirely of what we're talking about. The what if Triple H had taken over sooner, we're essentially seeing it now of what would happen had he taken over.
It's just a couple years delayed.
It's just a couple of years, bingo, because all of these people, not your Randy Orton, obviously, but I mean, Seth Rollins, your Roman, Gunther, Sami Zayn. All of these people were down there.
Your Angela, your Dawkins, and your Montez Ford.
Yep, exactly. Shinsuke, Gargano, Ciampa, New Catch Republic, Becky Lynch. All of them at some point were down there. Bailey, all of them were down there at some point.
Damian Priest.
Especially, oh my gosh, that's his guy. I mean, all these people are his guy and girls or whatnot, but
I want to add something really quickly because you said something about Triple H understanding and getting it, whatever. And Vince, was more than a few generations removed. I always remember I read this interview. This was like, I don't think I read it. I think I heard it. It was like a Howard Stern show. And he was interviewing one of the Playboy bunnies, and he was like, so how is it like living with Hef? How is it, whatever. And the girl is saying, oh, on Monday we do this, on Tuesday we do this, we play golf. And then she goes, yeah. And then like on Fridays, he sits us in a room and we watch old movies on like film, like the film that you got to roll up and put together and everything. And they were like, what? Like, yeah, like that's what he likes to do. That's what he enjoys. And
we used to have, like when we was in third grade and the teacher used to bring out and with the
real, well, wasn't third grade for me. I don't know how old you are. I ain't never seen no film like that.
Yeah, I definitely haven't.
Yeah,
Sorry,
but
I'm sorry, y'all, but my age. She is what it is.
yeah, all right, gold dog. But yeah. So she was saying like that's where his sensibilities were, like talking about the movies and this, that, and the third. And they kind of like laughed at it, what have you, but it gets to a certain point where you just get stuck in your ways and you see the world through a certain lens, and it's difficult for you to communicate with the generations that are beneath you. Now, no one is going to say these things to Vince because everyone back there is afraid of him, right? But they would voice their creative displeasure with Hunter. He would be the only one that could sit at the dinner table and say, hey, Vince, by the way, you know what you're doing with this guy? We want to make him LA Knight, but you made him a model. And, like the wrestlers didn't have that. And the industry on the WWE side was stagnant. I mean, you think about how many Monday Night Raw episodes that we watched that were just so bad. Like, it was so bad. SmackDown, always a little bit better, but it was just creatively just not popping. The thing that Hunter has, one, he's younger, and he can connect with these younger wrestlers because, one, like you mentioned, they looked up to him. But more importantly, over half these wrestlers looked up to Shawn.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to bring that up. Go ahead.
Good point. Good point.
Because he is the prototype for what he was the prototype for what the wrestlers today are: size, stature, agility, athletic ability, swag, all of the.
Shawn is the definition of 30 years ahead of his time.
Right. And he's that cog in the machine that connects multiple generations, right? It's him. It's him. And
Mr. WrestleMania.
And he's your best friend. So what Vince is arguing, Daniel Bryan's too small, he's this, he's that. Well, guess who Daniel Bryan trained with for a little bit?
Yeah,
right?
That's where he first trained.
That's where he first trained.
Right. So who's in there advocating, hey, Vince, you got to listen to this. Come on. Listen, I know how you feel. Yeah, he doesn't look like he can carry groceries, whatever, but he does look like he can moonsault off of a car. And most kids these days are that small. Like that type of thing of being able to understand that. So I really think, and this might be another what if or another appreciation show, whatever, but we have to look at Shawn Michaels as a centerpiece of bridging the past and the future where we are now, especially where he is, to the point where Sexy Red is talking about Shawn Michaels.
Yep.
Kendrick Lamar is being a piece of Shawn Michaels. Right? Like, to wrap this up, because I know I'm being a little bit long-winded.
No,
like, oh, I'm cooking. Let me cook. All right, so let me
cook.
Yeah.
Go cook.
So Triple H would be better served and is better served to do what he's been doing because of the relationship that he has with HBK. And you got HBK and NXT, Hunter up, in WWE. This is just the best thing that we could have as wrestling fans in terms of a what if scenario that we got now. A few years delayed, but we got it. And this is not a knock on what Vince has done for the industry, for our childhood, for our creative intake. This is not a knock on him, but at some point in time, the baton has to be passed. And this is how it was passed.
You know what's funny? All I'm going to do is, because you said it perfectly, I'm going to add on to that. Shawn Michaels is essentially the NXT superstar of the 90s.
Yes.
He is exactly what an NXT star is. The top of your Carmelo, Trick, all of them that are on the top of NXT now. Shawn Michaels was that in the 90s. He is the epitome of what an NXT star would have been to come from NXT to the main roster.
And Owen Hart was too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely Owen Hart.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny we say that because and you know what? And it's crazy that we're even branching off Brett too. Because essentially what we had from back in the day with NXT when we had,
When you're using Brett, then you got to throw one more name in there. I'm sorry, and I got to throw Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero.
But Eddie and
Eddie
Christian
was
came
late.
later.
See, Eddie was late. Yeah,
I say that, but Eddie was late bloomer. But the stuff that he was doing in Japan before he came to ECW, before he came over to WCW, that was what NXT stars. People didn't know about Eddie like that because him and Chris was over in Japan doing it, and Jericho. And I'm talking Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit was over there. Those are your NXT stars.
Yeah, I can give you. Okay, I'll give you that.
They just wasn't doing it on the big TV stage.
Yeah,
they was doing it over in Japan.
Champ. Yeah, I can give him that. I can. But as far as WWE, like just fully WWE guys, yeah, Owen, Brett, Shawn, because essentially that's your Garganos, your Ciampas, your your Sami Zayns or your Kevin Owens. Those are your people. Then, I mean, Rockers, Heart Foundation, they could have came from NXT. That's essentially the revival right there. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's so many connections with these guys, but Shawn is, and it's so for you brought it up before I did, and I love you for it. Shawn is the linchpin.
Yeah.
As much as it is Triple H, it's also Shawn, because somebody has to pick up NXT. And dare I say, how do I want to say? That's how I want to say it. Triple H's NXT is always heralded, and it should be.
But this version of NXT is crazy. Yeah,
that roster he had, guys, he was afforded the talent to be able to do what he did as well. Not that Shawn's working with, just garbage juice or nothing, because the talent he has there now is great as well. But dare I say, we'll look at it there's a legit comparison or a legit argument that could be made. Not saying that it's the case. There's a legit argument that Shawn Michaels NXT is possibly better than Triple H's.
Yeah.
Because of what Shawn's been able to do more with less. And like I said, I'm not knocking the talent he has, but Triple H had Charlotte. And granted, these are before their household names. But he had Charlotte, Becky, Sasha, Bailey, Finn, Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, your Damian Priest. He had Adam Cole. He had a lot of.
He had somebody else too. He had somebody else Shawn didn't have neither. He had American Dream, Dusty Rhodes.
Yep.
And that has been big too, because Shawn is doing it without a Dusty. A lot of those guys that you name attribute Dusty and Triple H with the help or the success they had going to the main roster. And we still on the same line of Triple H being taking control, because let's be honest, Triple H is the one who hired Shawn and put him down to NXT.
Yep. Because he's smart.
It wasn't Vince.
Well, that's his guy. I mean, in all honesty, who else can he trust?
He picked a successor, man.
Who
else you trust? He picked a successor to take care of his baby, right? Mm-hmm. And as any father or any friend or he wanted him to and you talk about comparison, he's starting to be better than him.
Yeah. No, it's so funny you say. It was just funny the way Champ brought it, and it really got me thinking. I was really sitting here like, yo, Shawn's NXT might really end up being better than than Triple H's. And that's not a knock on Triple H. It's really a testament that he trained Shawn up.
Well, I can tell you, I can tell you one way is better.
Yeah.
Shawn likes to have a lot of ways. He likes to have a lot of cake at catering.
Yeah,
let's just say
it is. Yeah, it is.
And on that note,
right. We could put a pin in things on that.
No, I put more than.
Yeah, well, yeah, there it is. It is.
Well, Glenn ended the show. Oh no, it's still recording.
No, it's still recording.
Oh, okay. Well, folks, we
Right.
might have spoke too loud,
Right. Where
but
did he go?
join us. Join
Yes.
us every Wednesday. What I used to say at 9 Central,
Right.
8 Eastern. It is the other way around.
That is hilarious.
This is Gold Dog Champ Creed. G-Lo signed off early, and we're here with the Wizard. Wizard, take us home.
Hey, look, if you're not confirmed, consider yourself denied. I haven't said that in so long.
I know. End of story. Oh.
Yep.